Coming up on this week's episode of the Bill Duffield Show.
The Battleship New Jersey is the most decorated battleship in the 249-year history of the United States Navy. It has 19 battle and campaign stars, and she served honorably in the Pacific during World War II, in Korea and Vietnam, and then she was reactivated and recommissioned for a final time in 1982, where she served off the coast of Lebanon during the Lebanese Civil War.
Welcome back to the Bill Duffield Show. This week's guest is Marshall Spevak. Marshall is the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, located in Camden, New Jersey. Prior to joining Battleship New Jersey, Marshall was Vice President of Public Affairs for Mike Worldwide, Chief of Staff to Vince Mazzeo and Assemblyman John Armato, President of the New Jersey Young Democrats, and more. Welcome to the show, Marshall.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Good to talk to you, and good to see you again.
Same here. Yeah, I think we first met when I volunteered for Mazzeo.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
What year was that? That was a few years ago now. Seems like several lifetimes ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just funny how time flies.
Absolutely.
So, can you share a little bit about your background and how you became Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Battleship New Jersey?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I really come from a governmental sort of political background. I ended up on the board of trustees, actually, of the Battleship about 8 years ago. My family used to run an event on Thanksgiving for soldiers who were being deployed overseas, who were mobilizing at Fort Dix at the Joint Base in New Jersey. And during the early parts of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, the Fort Dix would be the largest mobilization unit in the country. So basically, thousands of soldiers from all over the country would fly to Fort Dix and spend about 2 months there before they would be deployed overseas. And then once you got there, you were not allowed to go home. That was sort of your final stop. So every year on Thanksgiving, there were hundreds of soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors who were unable to go home for the holidays. And so we used to host a very special Thanksgiving Day dinner for them. We ended up the last 2 years that we did it, we ended up doing it on the Battleship New Jersey. And after that, I was asked to join the board of trustees. And in 2020, about 2 weeks before the COVID lockdown, I was elected chairman of the board. I spent the next 3 years as chairman, wading through the waters of COVID, and what felt like almost really a full-time job at that point. And then later in 2023, our then CEO resigned rather abruptly, and it sort of fell to me, and I was asked if I would be willing to take over on an interim basis, at least, to oversee the ship's upcoming dry docking project, which was a $10 million project for the battleship, the biggest project we've ever undertaken as a museum, and physically taking the ship out of the water for the first time in 35 years. And so I finally, after saying no a few times, I said yes, came on board as CEO on an interim basis by my choosing, and then ultimately decided once I was here and really in the role, how much I really enjoyed it. And so I decided to, of course, with the support of the board of trustees, to make the interim CEO role permanent. So I've been at the Battleship on a permanent basis, really for the last, I would say, 14, 15 months now.
Awesome. So can you tell a little bit about the background of the Battleship, when it was commissioned, and how it ended up in Camden? Because I was doing some research, and Camden was at there were other spots that they were considering besides Camden, right?
Absolutely. So a little background about the Battleship New Jersey, the BB-62. The Battleship New Jersey is the most decorated battleship in the 249-year history of the United States Navy. It has 19 battle and campaign stars, and she served honorably in the Pacific during World War II, in Korea and Vietnam, and then she was reactivated and recommissioned for a final time in 1982, where she served off the coast of Lebanon during the Lebanese Civil War, and around the time of the Marine Barracks bombing. She was finally decommissioned for the final time in 1991. But the ship's construction and history dates all the way back to 1940. And she was launched on December 7th, 1942. So exactly 1 year following the attack on Pearl Harbor. And then she was commissioned for the first time in 43. And after 1943, she was basically involved in every major amphibious landing in the Pacific, following her commissioning and her deployment to the South Pacific. So the ship served 21 years in total in the active fleet. Over 45,000 sailors and Marines served on board the ship. And today we are a museum and memorial in Camden, New Jersey, on the waterfront, just across the river from Philadelphia, where the ship was built and constructed. And actually, when the ship went to dry dock earlier in 2024, she actually returned back to dry dock number 3, which is the same dry dock that she was launched in 1942. So a lot of history there. And you're right, there was some competing interest in where the battleship would end up when the Navy decided to make the museum up for donation. Two groups sort of formed. There was the Battleship Commission, which wanted to bring the ship up to North Jersey, to Bayonne. And then there was a nonprofit called the Home Port Alliance, which was founded on a bipartisan basis in Camden in order to bring the ship back to Camden. Ultimately, the Navy decided, based on the strength of the Home Port Alliance's application, which is the parent 501c3 of the battleship, the Navy decided to award the battleship to the Home Port Alliance in Camden because of the stellar application that was submitted. And that application, which was over 2,000 pages long, is still used as an example today in the Navy for donation ships. So we won based, solely on the strength of our application and what the City of Camden had to offer. And we've been open since 2001 as a museum.
Yeah, I remember being at the Red Bank battlefield and watching the battleship come up with my grandfather. It was a really cool experience seeing that.
Awesome.
You can you talk a little bit about how Battleship New Jersey has helped revitalize the Camden waterfront?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some really tremendous progress made on the Camden waterfront over the last, I would say, 10 years or so. Crime is, Camden historically known for, unfortunately, some not great things, such as the crime rate and things like that. We are at historic lows right now in terms of crime reduction in Camden, thankfully. But the battleship was really sort of the first piece of the renaissance of the Camden waterfront. And when she returned home in 2001, that was sort of the first piece of the puzzle. Then you've got the Adventure Aquarium, which is an incredibly popular attraction. And now really over the last 10 years or so, the buildup of the waterfront, new investment, new buildings, new, corporate entities who have come to the city and to the waterfront, and has helped revitalize the waterfront. So we like to say that the battleship was kind of the first piece of the revitalization. But it was certainly an effort that took time and hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think we're finally at a place now where the waterfront and the community on the waterfront is really shaping up and really putting in a good effort. And it's shown in the reduction in crime and things like that, but it's also shown in the number of employees who are working here, living in the city of Camden, and enjoying what the city has to offer, which is a lot.
Yeah. The Sixers have a practice facility there now, right?
They are our neighbor right across the street from us. The Sixers have their practice facility as well as their corporate team offices in Camden. And they are, right down the street from us. Are basically our neighbor. They're good neighbors, and we try to be good neighbors in turn. Obviously, a lot of us are Sixers fans as well, so it's always great to drive by their facility, and it's a great place to be on the waterfront.
Yeah, even though I don't live in South Jersey, I'm still a huge Philly sports fan. So
Good, as you should be.
wherever I go, you can't see it behind me because it's audio, but I have my Phillies hat and
I see it.
stuffed animal of the
The
Phillies
fanatic.
fanatic. Yep.
Yeah, it's perfect. I
So
love it.
yep. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but do you do any like outreach or engagement with the local community?
Absolutely. A big part of what we do at the Battleship is educational programs, STEM programs, STEAM programs. We host a lot of school groups, um, and that's a big part of our business. We're a nonprofit, but we're a business. And obviously, as you can imagine, it's an incredibly expensive endeavor maintaining and keeping up a 80-plus-year-old historic battleship. So we are not only open for visitation every day, but we also um, are a sort of a premier event space. We host a lot of events on board the ship, but our outreach to the community is great. Aside from hosting a number of veterans events and things for veterans throughout the year, school groups are a big part of that. We have an overnight encampment program. We host thousands of kids overnight every year. A lot of Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, school groups, etc., who come. They can sleep over on the ship, sleep in the bunks that a sailor would sleep in, have dinner and go through the chow line like a sailor would have done so, scavenger hunts and different programming and things like that. So any school kid in the city of Camden can come visit the ship for free. But then we also have discounted rates and things like that for school groups. And it's a big part of what we do. And obviously education and educating the next generation is a big part of what we attempt to do, and I think what we do well.
What can visitors expect when they are on board the battleship? Also, do you have like a favorite spot on the ship?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to see. We have more areas of our ship open uh, for visitation than any other museum ship in the country. Our every day, we sell sort of two types of tours: a self-guided tour, which you can come and sort of just move along the ship at your own speed. You could be there for an hour, you could be there for 5 hours. We have a mile and a half long tour route, and three different self-guided tour routes. Every day at noon, we also have guided tours, and we do a variety of other tours, things like the engineering room is a popular one. We were able to open up one of the engineering rooms for the first time just a few years ago. You can go down in one of the 16-inch gun turrets, down the 6 levels, down to the powder room and other places. We have an extensive tour route. You could come back 2 or 3 times and probably, still see things again for the first time. And we're really proud of the tours that we offer and the amount of spaces on the ship that's open. And unlike, some other museums where you may visit and you walk in a room and, there's a lot of plexiglass up, or maybe you just kind of look in the room and you can only look. We're not like that. You can walk into the rooms. You can, sort of touch the equipment that the sailors used in World War II, and sort of have that sort of lived experience. And so we're really proud of what we offer, and we're continuing to offer and continuing to open up more and more spaces on the ship. Just this coming year, we're planning on opening up a couple of new spaces, including our Mardet berthing area, which was Mardet is the Marine detachment. So I mentioned earlier that we had 45,000 sailors and Marines who served on board the ship during her time in the active service, and several thousand of those included Marines, U.S. Marines. A Mardet, a Marine detachment, served on board the ship, and their berthing spaces and their separate areas from the Navy guys is has not been opened. Some of these particular ones in the past have not been opened. So with the grant from the state, we plan on opening those later this year, and we're continuing to open up new spaces every year. I think my favorite spots on the ship, I really love what we call our CEC, our Combat Engagement Center. It's kind of one of those things that is almost straight out of a movie where the Tomahawk cruise missiles were fired from, where the TAO would be the tactical action officer. So if you watch any movies and you hear that term, you can imagine you could stand and sit exactly where those types of sailors would have sat, during their time on the battleship when the ship was in combat. So it's a cool place, and obviously a lot of the equipment's rather old from the 80s, and some even all the way back to the 1940s. So it's also a pretty cool education in old school computers and technology, and things like that. Analog technology. The battleship 16-inch guns can fire a projectile 23 miles and hit a target within 30 feet. So
Wow.
that's the 1940s technology. So there's just a lot of cool things to see and do.
Yeah, I definitely. When I next time I come home, I definitely want to make a stop there.
Please do.
And check it out. Yep. You mentioned that the battleship just went through a dry dock. What are some of the challenges of maintaining a large battleship like this?
Yeah, so the dry docking project, as I mentioned before, was the most expensive and the most time consuming project. As we used to say, the days were long, but the weeks were short. We spent almost $10 million in basically 80 days. First of all, we moved the ship for the first time in 25 years. And the ship came out of the water for the first time in 35 years. And I'm very happy to say that and this isn't just me saying this is also sailors who served on board saying this is the best shape the battleship has been in probably since she was reactivated in 1982. And we took on some major projects while we were at the dry dock. Just getting the ship underway to begin with was an incredible feat. We when we were finally moving, so when the ship pushed off the pier in Camden, we did a 180 turn, and headed south, down under the Walt Whitman Bridge, first to the Paulsboro Marine Terminal, where we had to do some last minute work, and then finally a couple days later into dry dock number 3 at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. It was a historic homecoming for the battleship. As I mentioned, the dry dock number 3 is where the ship was launched from on December 7th, 1942. But this was actually the ship's 4th time back in that same dry dock. And one of the reasons that the Navy ended up picking Camden was the availability of these dry docks for future maintenance in Philadelphia. We undertook 3 major projects, which ended up being closer to 5. First was a repainting of the hull. And that's incredibly important. Steel rusts, but steel with paint does not rust. And so there's 3 different coatings of paint on the hull of the ship, and they're 3 different colors. So you see the first color is red, the second color is this gold light color, and the third is a gray. And so basically, you can see the condition of the hull based on what color you would see underneath. And then we also did other things like switching out the ship's cathodic protection system. We took off 1,204 zinc anodes and put on 600 aluminum anodes. We put boxes around our propeller shafts. The battleship still has its propellers, even though we don't move under our own power. And a variety of other projects that popped up in the course of the dry docking, and things that we saw that needed to get done, but also things that we would say, okay, well, we raised X amount of money. Okay, we can do this Reach project, which we didn't think maybe we had the money to do, but now we can do. So it was an incredibly special time the dry docking period for the ship. We don't think we will need to do that again now for another 30 years. And we think the work that we did will keep the ship floating literally and figuratively as a museum on the Camden waterfront for the next 30 years. Um,
Nice.
it was an incredible time, one that's hard to believe it was so long ago now. But a time I think that everyone on the battleship sort of looks back and is looks back on rather fondly.
Nice. Yeah, I remember kind of just periodically going back and checking on the status and all of that. Just to see how like dry dock was all going and all that. So, can you share any stories from like people who served on the ship?
Sure.
Or-
Um, I can say a couple things. Obviously, these happy to tell the stories, but they're not necessarily my stories to tell. They're really the sailors. We have one guy in particular. His name's Ken. He served on the ship in Vietnam, and he is actually still on our crew now. He works at the battleship, and he runs our overnight program that I mentioned. Um, you know, in Vietnam, the ship provided a lot of firepower for Marines serving in the jungles in Vietnam. And very often you would hear a story of a Marine who came on board and kissed the deck, or hearing from a Marine who would say that their life, they wouldn't be here if it was not for the battleship New Jersey. They would not have survived whatever engagement they were in if it wasn't for the battleship sort of providing that overarching firepower, hitting their enemies, calling in for fire support, things like that. You hear some of those stories, which are obviously, heart wrenching, but heartwarming at the same time. The ship went through a typhoon in Vietnam. And Ken would tell you a story of um, uh, losing a hatch in the middle of the typhoon, and guys out there in the crazy winds and crazy conditions trying to weld back on a door in the middle of a typhoon to make sure that there's not flooding in certain compartments, things like that. So you've got a lot of those types of stories. Obviously, the sailors in World War II and Korea could tell many stories. But the ship's history is unlike many others, and with the 19 battle stars, she served in more engagements than any other battleship. So there's a ton of things to say, and are often told a lot better, not by me, but by the sailors who really lived them.
Is there anything you really want to go over?
Yeah, I just I'll just say we're open 7 days a week.
Mhm.
363 days a year, weather depending.
Okay.
Closed a couple days for snow here and there, but other than that, we're pretty much open all the time. Despite the fact that the heaviest visitation comes during the summer and the fall. We are a climate controlled facility. We have heat. 90+% of the tour route is heated. So this time is sort of a downtime for us in terms of visitation, but people don't necessarily think of the battleship as something to do during the winter time, but we absolutely are. And as I said, it's been we're climate controlled. You can come, you can leave your jacket and hat somewhere and walk around for a couple hours. And we're open all the time. We're open for events. We're open for overnights. We're open for, we do the types of events we do is everything from, small 10-person promotion and retirement ceremonies to, 300 people seated dinners and proms. We've done concerts, boxing, wrestling,
Oh
um,
wow.
you name it, we do it, or we figure out how to do it. And so we, especially during COVID, when everyone wanted to do events outside, if you remember, we became actually a pretty premier destination for, high school senior proms. Those couple of years we did like 10 or 12 proms a year, and we're still doing
Wow.
them. Unfortunately, not as many, but we're still doing them. So we're an event space, we're a museum, and so much more. So Camden Waterfront, we're open 7 days a week. BattleshipNewJersey.org. We have an incredible social media following. We have over 260,000 subscribers who tune into our YouTube page. So follow us on social media, subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us, and if you're in the Philadelphia area, New Jersey area, come out and see us.
Awesome. And I will be putting all the links in the description as
Awesome.
well, so people can easily access it. Have you ever been to the Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial? Comment with your favorite memory. If you want to know more about the Battleship and Museum, check out their website. Links to their website and social media will be in the description. That's it for this week's episode of the Bill Duffield Show. I want to thank Marshall for coming on the show and talking about the Battleship New Jersey.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to see you again. Wishing you all the best, and look forward to seeing you on the Battleship in the future.
Likewise, I'm going to be planning a trip home in the spring, so we'll have to set something up.
Absolutely.
For me to come by. If you like what we're doing on here, please share with your family, friends, and colleagues to help the podcast grow. Thanks for the support, and we'll see you on the next episode.